views expressed on this program by its guests do not necessarily reflect the views or beliefs of the host or radio network. And this program's sole intent is to help educate, foster critical debate, and help raise and discuss political and social issues which already exist in the public domain. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stCenturyWire.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode 345 of this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program brought to you here on ACR. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We've got a fantastic program lined up for you again this week. Last week was a very powerful broadcast. Thank you so much for your comments. And I got a lot of nice messages from people on social media and a lot of great replies on Twitter and Facebook and other platforms. So, that was a great show. We did hit it pretty hard last week, and I want to thank you very much for your support as well. We're going to be joined by a roving correspondent for culture and sport at the top of the hour. But he'll be also, I'm going to coax him into wearing his frock this week. Brother Basil Valentine joining us at the top of the hour. I will be performing a little sermon from the Gospel of the Branch Covidians. And so that will be something to look forward to. It is Sunday, so we will see what the new church is saying, Church of the New Normal, the Tabernacle of the Branch Covidians. And so we are very much looking forward to that. And there's a fantastic article, we'll talk about it actually later in the hour, by C.J. Hopkins of the Consent Factory. He's also featured in the New Dawn Great Reset Special Edition. And he's got a great thing called the Covidian Cult. And we've actually republished that up at 21stCenturyWire.com, and he's an extraordinary playwright, one of the great writers and authors that we're honored to be sharing his work at 21st Century Wire. And this is quite an article, actually, and it really does hit the nail right on the head in terms of how far things have gone off the cliff of reality, and the collective sanity is really under threat in the current epoch. So C.J. Hopkins, the Covidian Cult, check that out up at 21stCenturyWire.com. And we'll talk about a few things. I mean, do you really want to talk about COVID again? I was like, talk about COVID. I don't know. We might talk about COVID. It's just unescapable. But I don't think maybe a lot of our listeners they need a break. They want to stay informed. Obviously, you want to be informed, but you do need a break from it. Unfortunately, it's inescapable, because things are accelerating so fast. And as I was talking to our producer before the show, they used to call people like us or independent media practitioners used to call us conspiracy theories. I've been called everything. We're not tinfoil now, though. The tinfoils are the ones parroting the official narrative. And I think this is becoming more and more evident with each passing day. So we the people who are always giving you the 50,000-foot view have suddenly found ourselves on the other side of that particular smear. which is very interesting. And I know a lot of people listening to the show sharing that sentiment as well. You've noticed it. I've noticed it. Everybody's kind of noticed it. We are talking to people on on the front of the comment streams, publicly, but also privately as well. So many people that you might consider to be mainstream, people who you might consider to be celebrities, you could say, well-known people who have achieved, great things in their lives and careers, highly regarded in the quote mainstream, and all of a sudden, they're very interested in our work, and also the work of the UK column, and people that normally wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole are actually reaching out and saying, I really like what you guys are doing. I like your approach. You're spot on this and other issues. And Russiagate, some people have come forward and said, thank you so much for your coverage on Russiagate, a couple of years after the fact, because yes, we were outliers. We were pariahs with the stance that we took immediately on Russiagate and in the 2016 election. Before the election, we took that position publicly and in writing. And so, yeah, we're still getting people, saying thanks now, because now the whole COVID crisis has really crystallized, I would say, what is the true intellectual opposition, not the right or the left, but, what is the true intellectual opposition? These are people who can overcome, who can transcend partisan dogma. And this has become clear with the COVID crisis. What else became clear is interesting is those people who are kind of hardcore, ideologically driven leftists retreated into their kind of, far left corner and are happily sitting back, loving the new normal, basically. So we were allies before with many of these people with regards to Syria and other issues, but they've completely ran to the side of the government on the COVID lockdown situation. So that's been interesting, and you can kind of see who's who, and you can see who's governed by their ideologies. And I thought it was quite interesting, and I brought this observation up on Friday of the UK Column News, obviously Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 p.m. UK time, ukcolumn.org, also on YouTube, the UK Column News, UK Column, with a premier alternative media outlet in the United Kingdom, longest running and most popular. And we were talking about this whole business with ideology and politics. If you think that if you think the coronavirus is only about the virus, if you think it's only about medical science, if you think it's about public health, if you really think it's about just those things, if you think that it's only public health risks and dangers and genuine threats to public health, if you think that's what it's all about, I'm going to have to tell you that that's not what it's all about at all. Okay, it is all politicized, 100%. It has become 100% politics. And some people are going to argue with me. They can say, no, it's not 100% politics. It's a genuine threat. There's 200,000 people who died in America, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, we've hashed out and deconstructed this fallacy of a talking point many times in the previous episodes. Our regular listeners will know about that. But what I'm talking about is politics, the politics of lots of things, the politics of corporate control, the politics of profiteering. Politics is just, it's an avenue for power. It's an avenue for profit. It's an avenue for people to lord over other people in order to push an ideological agenda. And none of those things I've just mentioned there, those three things, none of them have anything to do with public health in reality. Okay, COVID, the coronavirus, lockdowns have just become totally political, totally politicized, every single aspect of it. And what's interesting is that a lot of people we're trying to avoid having this be a ballot issue in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. But guess what? COVID is now on the ballot. That's right. Lockdowns are on the ballot. And the Democrats have tried so hard to avoid making it an actual wedge issue. And so it's getting very close. I'm not saying it's there yet. It might break in a week or two, right before the election. But it's getting very close to not just pro or against lockdown. That's not what's only going to be on the ballot. What's going to be on the ballot is those who believe and follow and are bowing to the official nonsense, and those who are not naive and who are calling BS. That's also going to be on the ballot. And it's going to have to come to a point, it's going to have to come to a head where you don't have people that are taking a political position, a partisan position, or, because generally a lot of Democrats are just kind of compliant, absolutely compliant to lockdowns, to social distancing, to mask mandates, to school closures, remote this, remote that. They're completely compliant, not pushing back, and a lot of Republicans are too. But there's a lot of people also on the right that are not accepting it on many different grounds, including the fact that it's unconstitutional, the fact it's unlawful, the fact it doesn't even adhere, not even remotely, to the actual science, because the science has become politicized. And there are people in the world of the Anthony Fauci's, in the world of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in the world of CNN, MSNBC, Washington Post, New York Times, etc., Nancy Pelosi, that in their mind they believe that, and in the UK it's absolutely rife with Boris Johnson's government and the mainstream media that are basically backing him, and the BBC and everything, on all of these lockdowns, and they're calling circuit breakers short term. We need a 2-week lockdown. Let's call it a circuit breaker. Break the COVID transmission circuit with our 2-week circuit breaker. I mean, it's a joke. They're just inventing new things. Every one of these people and parties I have mentioned, they're just waiting. They're hoping that they keep tinkering with it, that they keep introducing new tiers and new levels and threat levels and strategies and circuit breakers and rules and regulations that nobody can understand, that change by the day. And they're hoping that they're hoping biology will eventually conform to their political ideology. And a lot of people are going to sit back and listen to what I just said and say, what the hell is he talking about? I'll tell you what I'm talking about. When I say political ideology, there is a common political ideology that's running through lockdowns, that's running through social distancing, that's running through immunity passports, all of that. Masks, all of it. There's a common ideology, transatlantic, global, and it's called technocracy. There are those on the left and there are those on the right who are looking to capitalize on this crisis. And they have a common ideology. They have a common political ideology, and it's called technocracy. Yes, it has a communist version of it, expression couched within the socialist left, and it also has a right-wing version couched within the fascist right. And at some point, if you go all the way left and you go all the way right, and it goes and makes a circle, and where fascism and communism meet together as two happy bedfellows. And this is where we're heading right now, under the color of COVID. Because both of those extremists, those authoritarians, these totalitarians on the left and the right, have a common ideology. They're all technocrats. The corporatists are extremist technocrats, fundamentalist technocrats. They are the Taliban of technocracy on the corporate side, Silicon Valley being the ultimate in terms of that ideology. That it's almost a religious It's very close to being a full-blown religion, okay? And on the right just see this as a fantastic method of control and just wielding raw power. On the far right, those I'm talking about, statists and heavy-handed governments that are basically using this, the Corona coup, we called it back in March and April, the Corona coup. They all have the same thing in common. And so, but people are seeing through this. It's taking a long time. And there's a few opening salvos that have been fired recently. One of them is from the Mail on Sunday. This is a major UK newspaper. Now, before we've seen individual writers and journalists, Peter Hitchens, Alison Pearson, some good writers for The Spectator, for instance, and Freddie Forsyth, of course. I think he writes for the, I forgot what newspaper, maybe the Express. But there's been a few individuals, but they've been marginalized, and they've been kind of relatively isolated in their views. They have a following on social media, and they have a quiet support base out there. But no newspaper has come out, no editorial department has come out and basically gone all guns blazing and published anything, basically, full salvos at the government. Well, that happened today. That happened. The Mail on Sunday in the UK put a comment, and their editorial comment down. It's probably the strongest rebuke that we've seen yet in 7 months with regards to this ridiculous lockdown, new normal situation. And we've reposted that up at 21stcenturywire.com. And so we'll see. That's it. It has opened up the opportunity for others to follow suit. Now, I don't, obviously, it's not going to mean that they're going to change their editorial policy. And, they're schizophrenic, the Mail. But the main point is the door's open now. Cat's out of the bag. So in terms of corruption, let's talk about corruption for a minute. And so what's happening with the United States presidential election? We've got October surprise made landfall this past week. And we were wondering what's going to be the October surprise. We talked in previous shows, the Billy Bush weekend, Trump's tax returns, various scandals, pushed Trump back. And then all of a sudden we were waiting saying, where's the Anthony Weiner laptop this time? And it came in the form of a laptop again. Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, Democratic nominee, presidential candidate Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden, much maligned and for good reason, his laptop turned up. Well, it turned up actually a couple of years ago, and it turns out the FBI had it and were sitting on it. Yes, you heard that right. The FBI were, surprise, surprise, were sitting on Hunter Biden's laptop. It was full of incriminating evidence. And it proves that Joe Biden lied multiple times, directly questioned by the press, with if he knew about his son's corrupt dealings in the Ukraine with Burisma Energy. And the media have been running cover on this pretty much full on for a couple of years now, and especially during the impeachment trial. And I said on a number of widely watched shows where I was a guest last year, I said that the whole impeachment thing was a cover-up for the Biden's corruption in the Ukraine. And it turns out we were right. And this is exactly what it was. That's what the impeachment fiasco was designed to do. The Democrats knew damn well, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff, the John Brennans and all the sort of blue deep state cartel, they knew damn well that Hunter Biden was basically compromised, and Joe was extremely compromised, even so far that Joe Biden admitted on camera that he blackmailed the Ukrainian government to fire a prosecutor who was investigating his own son's company by withholding a $1-point-something billion loan from the United States. So, they're trying to string Trump up for a telephone call with Zelensky back in 2019, holding up a Javelin missile shipment or something by 60 days. And they managed to mount an impeachment inquiry and a whole trial and this whole song and dance. And meanwhile, You've got absolute racketeering going on with the Bidens. Not only that, he's pocketing money. Not only that, the money that Hunter Biden's pocketing, as we revealed on Friday's UK Column News, and if those of you who watch that will see, we revealed it in November of 2019 at 21stcenturywire.com. We revealed that money that went into Hunter Biden's pocket was illicit money that had been laundered through a giant Ponzi scheme involving dodgy Ukrainian bonds, state sovereign debt bonds that were laundered through the United States, through the top investment houses in the United States, headed by some of the top Obama administration supporters, and even the same firm with Obama's former national security advisor at the board, I believe. So we detailed all of that a year ago. So we just decided to re-highlight that. So the whole Biden thing, it goes much deeper. So the New York Post released this story, and what did they do? Well, Twitter's reaction to this, a lot of people know this, but they published a story about Hunter Biden's emails. It's absolutely damning. Literally evidence that Hunter Biden introduced one of the heads of Burisma to Joe Biden while he was vice president. And all the time, Biden's been denying it. I don't know anything about my son's dealings in the Ukraine. So imagine that your son's gifted a $50,000 a month gig in the Ukraine. This is a country at the top of the World Corruption Index. So immediately after the United States orchestrated a coup in February of 2014, your son's gifted a job with a dodgy gas firm in Burisma Holdings, and you are vice president. Not only are you vice president, you're in charge of the Ukraine portfolio, and you're claiming you don't know anything about this gig that your son landed. It was just a coincidence. My talented son, Hunter Biden. Well, it turns out that he's got his issues, and a lot of this stuff has been exposed by the New York Post. Twitter's reaction was to shut down, believe it or not, the account of the New York Post. This is a major daily newspaper in the United States. And because the CEO, Jack Dorsey, and his entourage at Twitter, they didn't like this story because it hurt Joe Biden. So what did they do? They shut down the New York Post's Twitter account. Not only that, White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany, they suspended her account because she retweeted and shared it. This is Twitter. And Facebook throttles it, throws a fact check roadblock over it. So you have Democrat Party oriented tech monopolies, Twitter, Facebook. Who knows what else went on with Google in terms of the Google searching. I'll bet they throttled the hell out of that on search engines. I'd like to see a congressional or Senate committee investigate that as well. In the heat of an election, a story comes out, that's factual. The Bidens haven't denied that these emails aren't authentic. None of that. So apparently this is all real. It's all been checked and double checked. So this comes out in the heat of an election. And the Democrat tech monopolies erase the story from the platform. So they want to hide it from the view of the American people. This isn't just, this isn't just a story that's, a partisan axe to grind. It's not like the Billy Bush weekend where it was a leaked audio tape that was secretly recorded, a locker room conversation between Trump and Billy Bush from 2005. No. This is evidence of corruption and graft by a sitting vice president and his son and their clique during the last administration. It's kind of highly relevant to the election. And it shows that Joe Biden himself lied on record multiple times. And the media has been running cover for him. So they've completely backed off this story. None of them are trying not to talk about it, but they started talking about it after 48 hours. Guess what the mainstream media line is on the Hunter Biden email scandal? The mainstream media line is that this is Russian disinformation. They're calling it Russian disinformation. And this is what we're seeing on social media. It is absolutely unbelievable. So the corruption that we're talking about is systemic corruption. This is real systemic corruption. This is real election meddling. This is real. They spend 4 years trying to skull plug you to make the public believe that the Russians interfered and hacked and meddled and colluded in the 2016 election. And after all of the investigations and all of the Senate inquiries and all of the fake news stories that were published ad nauseum every day, trying to connect Trump with the Russians and saying Putin did this, that, and the other, no evidence has ever been produced to substantiate any of it, not even the hack of the DNC. And here you have real meddling. In the final stretch of a presidential election, real meddling. Russia could never have any level, even their wildest dreams, couldn't do a hundredth of what these people have done in 48 hours. And so is this not a problem? Is this not a crisis of democracy? Do you know who else would do exactly the same thing? Think of it. A story comes up, a disclosure comes up that's embarrassing to a political leader, and the apparatuses of control move to throw down a big firewall. Let's call this the Great Blue Firewall. And it's no different than the Great Communist Firewall in China, because this is exactly what would happen in China. Or this is what would happen in Saudi Arabia or the UAE. I've been to many countries where there is a great firewall run by the government. And if anything bad comes up that might embarrass somebody or might expose corruption, that firewall comes down so fast. As soon as that piece of content is detected on any social media platform that's available in that country, boom, firewall comes down. It disappears. Only accessible by VPN or other means. So that's what they do in these authoritarian countries. And in the United States, they're doing exactly the same thing, except rather than the state do it, it's done through corporate monopolies. Is there any difference between a Chinese Communist Party doing that and Silicon Valley executives, Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey? Is there any difference? The action is the same. The result is the same. The only difference is how people would categorize the people who are performing this heinous act. It's absolutely undemocratic. And not only that, it stretches to COVID. Scott Atlas, he's one of the heads of the White House coronavirus task force. Guess what happened to Scott Atlas, Dr. Scott Atlas? He was censored by Twitter. Social media firm Twitter basically, what did they do? He was banned from tweeting. Wow. So his tweets were removed and he was banned from tweeting until he agreed to delete tweets that Twitter deemed to be dangerous or risky to the public. So can you believe this? So this is one of the heads of the White House coronavirus task force. And he's being leaned on by Twitter for publishing what? Evidence from the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine at Oxford University about masks and their lack of effectiveness. And CDC links. Here's what he posted from the CDC. Our systematic review found no significant effect of face masks on the transmission of laboratory-confirmed influenza. That was deemed to be dangerous by the executives at Twitter. So they're censoring the heads of government task forces. So what's going on here? Is there an agenda here? Well, quite frankly, yes. This is dangerous. So tech executives are working against the public interest. So they are effectively doing the same thing mainstream media are doing. What mainstream media do is avoid talking about things and attack anybody who's telling the truth. That's what the mainstream media's main function has become. And then you have Silicon Valley that's just straight throwing down the blue firewall or throwing down the big pharma firewall, protecting their advertisers. That's what the mainstream media are doing as well. So that's what's going on. Here's Joe Biden. This is listen to this. This is clip one. This is Joe Biden getting off his private jet. Apologies if he sounds muffled, but I think he's got like 3 masks on, like a triple layer of masks. And he was confronted about the New York Post story, and this is how he's talking to journalists about this. Listen to this.
And Mr. Biden, what is your response to the New York Post story about your son, sir?
I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. Right up your alley. Those are the questions you always ask.
Here it goes. It was a smear campaign. Said Joe Biden, I really feel sorry for this guy because he is sinking like a brick right now. And so this is just a little montage type clip, and it's statements that Biden made when challenged about Hunter Biden's emails months ago, and then what he said in public. This is kind of a mashup mix, basically. It's clip number 3. This is Biden's corruption. Listen to this.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv. Why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader? And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. You should be asking him the question. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. This appears to be an overwhelming abuse of power. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. Trying to intimidate a foreign leader. I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And everybody's looked at it and said there's nothing there. Ask the right question.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. There's nothing there, right? Nothing there. It's just a big smear campaign, Joe. So this is a pathological individual, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And it's so Biden, you got his son, and you put the two together, and then you got the strippers and the drugs and baby mommy, and you've got and the images that are coming out. There are going to be probably some very embarrassing videos that come out as well from this disclosure. So it's not looking good for the Bidens. So count on the media to not cover it at all, basically. But it's still there, and people. I mean, this is pretty serious. This is pretty serious. How much is this going to affect voters, swing voters? It depends. It depends. But I think it's kind of shameful that people would want to bury this and call it Russian disinformation, because that is another lie. So one lie is just a whole daisy chain of cover-ups and lies by the media and the Democratic Party. So that's where that story's at. And so that was the October surprise. Is there going to be another October surprise? I don't know. Could be. There might be a few. Trump might just see this being dripped out. It might be death by 1,000 cuts for Joe Biden in the next 3 weeks. We shall see. But so the battleground states are heating up, and we're working on some election coverage from 21st Century Wire that might be quite compelling in the next couple of days, for the next few weeks and whatnot. But there's some interesting trends in the battleground states. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit with Basil Valentine in the next hour. So we'll talk about the election. We'll talk about the odds. Of course, Basil is our main oddster here at 21st Century Wire and the Sunday Wire. But the bookies are the lead's closing, the gap's tightening. Biden had a 9% national lead in terms of national mainstream polling, and so that tightened substantially after the Hunter Biden email scandal, and so it's made some of the bookies change the odds. Now I think we've looked a little bit closer than this, and we're going kind of doing deep dives on all the battleground states, and we're looking at a total in terms of battleground states. Probably, so we have a list here. How long is our list? We got about 11 battleground states, maybe more, 13 battleground states. 13 battleground states that we think that it looks like in terms of various different factors that probably 4 of those are probably going to go to Trump, and 2 of those for certain are going to go to Biden. So there's 7. So there's 7 battleground states that we believe are up for grabs in this election, and we'll talk about that more in detail in subsequent coverage. A little bit in the next hour, but maybe more during the week with the analysis we're working on with 21 Wire in the UK column. But there's a lot going on. So lockdown and COVID are definitely on the ballot. Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan, Democrat. And she tried to pull a fast one this past week. So her lockdown was struck down by the state Supreme Court. So what did she do? She tried to put a stay on the order to delay the lifting of lockdown for 21 days until after the general election. So she wanted it locked down until right after the day after the general election, or the couple of days after. And the state Supreme Court told her, slapped her on the wrist, said, no, you don't. So they basically caught her trying to do what the U.S. government does to other countries, sanction them, strangle them. So this campaign, I'm calling it the campaign of maximum pressure. So it seems like for the Democrats, lockdown is an election strategy. And so Michigan's a perfect example of that. Why would the governor want to do that? Why would you want to keep a lockdown instead of just lift it and let people get on with it? No, because they don't want people to feel prosperous, to feel freedom, to have any kind of positive attitude, because that will sort of generally help the incumbent. And that's according to all polling dynamics. So if there's an uptick in confidence or a good feeling, generally that means points are going to migrate towards the incumbent. So the Democratic Party in Michigan, the Democratic governor, they were actively trying to keep the state under lockdown. This is just outrageous. So this is total politicization of lockdowns and COVID. And this is not only on a state level, this is being pursued by people like Whitmer and Cuomo in New York, but also on a national level. Nancy Pelosi has intervened to stop the passage of the coronavirus relief bill. There's a $1.8 trillion of various relief. I mean, between myself, the lamppost, and our listeners, I think I don't think the government should be writing out $1.8 trillion stimulus checks for anything, period, okay? Shouldn't even have locked down, or there should be no need for such relief. So in that sense, it's a giant gravy train and a scam. But let's just say you're playing along with the official narrative, and there is this, for whatever the reason, and we just accept the fact that there's massive economic hardship as a result of state and federal policy decisions from March, lockdown type policy decisions, shutdown orders, and so forth, PPE and all this other extra pork. Okay, let's just accept that that's a reality. The Democrats are wanting to hold that money back until after the election. So they won't make a deal with Trump. They're arguing over, $1.8 trillion, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. To be frank, federal government shouldn't be throwing out that kind of money. But the Democrats wanted something like $2.4 trillion. So this is why the House leader, Nancy Pelosi, is holding it up. She's holding up the bill. So she's made it political, and it's absolutely backfiring on her. And she's getting roasted right now, even by other Democrats. Even CNN roasted her on this. It was really embarrassing to see Wolf Blitzer basically pushing back against Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you know things are beyond the pale when CNN starts doing journalism. You know things are really, really desperate and in bad shape. So that's what happened. That's what happened. So we're getting an idea of how this agenda is being pushed. And to really know where it's heading, to know where the language is heading, where the social programs are heading, where the Great Reset is heading, what the new normal really looks like, you have to go and look at the beta testing grounds for major globalist policies and social engineering policies. So there are a couple of countries that are beta testing grounds that are always getting everything first, and they're put under tremendous pressure to comply and basically, bring that ball over the goal line, as it were, score a touchdown or a try. Those two countries, the two premier countries in the Anglosphere, are Australia and New Zealand. If you got the special edition of New Dawn magazine, the Great Reset edition, my feature in there regarding the Great Reset, a global flu d'etat, I explain why and how Australia and New Zealand are basically beta testing grounds for these types of policies. And one of the main reasons is there's a few things that hold them together with the other major countries within NATO and also the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. So what the Five Eyes is the United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. That's the Five Eyes. That's the core of the sort of the global power, who I think is wielding global power right now in the top position will be the Five Eyes countries. They work together. It's not the U.S. on its own. So intelligence sharing, but it's also about streamlining policy across those five countries, because that's the Anglosphere. And so that's, Canada and the United States, that's North America, that's in the Western Hemisphere. And then you have Great Britain, they're in the European Hemisphere. They hold sway over the Commonwealth as well, all of those countries, which represents arguably the biggest network globally in terms of politics, economics, and sort of historical associations, the British Commonwealth. And then you have Australia and New Zealand, and they're an outpost for the Anglosphere within the Pacific region, Oceania region, they call it. And so that really gives the Anglosphere coverage over most of the hemispheres of the planet, basically. So if you want to roll out any agenda or anything like, let's say the war on terror, for instance, you want to roll that out, you need to have your outposts in every single hemisphere to make that work. And also helps the fact that English is the world's second language. So in terms of policy normalization across languages, that's done and dusted in terms of the Five Eyes countries. And then in terms of security compliance, look at what we see, the regimes traveling through airports, for instance. That's global. It's not just the U.S. I mean, 9/11 happened to the U.S., but the whole world adopted more or less this anti-terror regime in terms of airport security, going through body scanners, and et cetera, and giving away your privacy and being spied on all the time, et cetera. That's accepted as the new normal post 9/11. Well, we have the same thing that's being rolled out with COVID. So think of it as 9/11, but kind of the second, more intense, much deeper penetrating version of the regime that came in post 9/11. So instead of the Department of Homeland Security, you have the Department of Biosecurity, Biosurveillance. The joint in the UK, it's the Joint Biosecurity Center, they call it. And so it's a whole new layer of security, state bureaucracy, just catered for this COVID crisis. So it's not going to go away, it's permanent. So they need things to do, just like the Homeland Security and the TSA and all the various new security regimes needed things to do after 9/11. So they created things to do in many cases. And they ran lots of different ops and people and groups and controlled opposition, you could call it, within the war on terror, and it kind of kept the whole show going. So Australia is very important, and these are two relatively wealthy countries in that they have large natural resources, mineral deposits, and they have trade surpluses, at least in the case of Australia, very healthy trade surplus, and very small population. So, of course, they got a lot of money to spend on social programs, and that comes in handy when you have to pay off the population to stay at home under lockdown. So this is why there hasn't been much resistance in Australia, because they've been well paid to stay home, getting these job keepers and job seekers allowances, and that's kind of calmed the left down. So lefties are all at home watching Netflix, quite happy, getting the government dumping a nice wedge in their account every month. You're not going to get much pushback or protesting from them because of that. New Zealand is very similar in that respect, but New Zealand's an isolated island at the bottom of the South Pacific. So it's very easy for them to claim success against COVID, because it's pretty easy to isolate New Zealand, small population, but they're being touted as the global model, as if. So Australia, this is where Australia is at. Watch Australia. Watch Victoria State in Australia. This is where Melbourne is. Watch Chairman Dan Andrews. We joked before calling Victoria State the People's Republic of Victoria, breakaway republic, formerly of Australia. We joke, but it's kind of true, actually. So Dan Andrews, Chairman Dan. So clip number 2, this is Chairman Dan. Listen closely. Listen to the language. Listen very, very carefully. You see where this is going. Roll this.
It is not leadership to do what is popular in the short term. Leadership is doing what is right. And whether I'm criticised or praised, that is not my concern. My concern is to defeat this second wave, find a COVID normal, and lock it in until a vaccine arrives.
Okay, there you go. Find a COVID normal. Find a COVID normal. Lock it in. And lock it in until a vaccine arrives. So, this clown, God knows, where his head is at. What's he been smoking? Like you can, what is a COVID normal? It's just another conceptual, abstract construct that they've created. Very creative, these government operatives, these technocrats. They've just created a new thing, a COVID normal. So apparently this is an R number, or an R naught number that they're happy with, that they think is manageable, and running lockdowns all the time in Australia. The only people dying of Australia from COVID are in care homes, and they're well over the age of 80, some in their 90s. All people who are, in fact, older than the average life expectancy of the average Australian, funny enough. So, according to that, I think the average COVID age of death, of alleged or reported COVID deaths, the average age is higher than the average life expectancy age, at least in the U.S. and Britain. Go ahead and look it up, and you can check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So the average COVID death age is slightly higher than the average life expectancy age in general. So what does that tell you? Well, if you want to live longer, it's probably better off getting COVID, by the statistics. I know that sounds insane, but I'm using their own logic in terms of the science and the data, okay? The whole thing is ridiculous now. So let's just be ridiculous about it. If you want to live longer, get COVID. The data doesn't lie, does it? So I know it's stupid, but this whole thing is stupid. So Dan Andrews is saying, lock it in until a vaccine arrives. How long is that going to be? 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years? So that all these governments are going to go bankrupt. And guess what's going to happen? Then you'll see announcements from the World Bank, and it won't be very long from now. It'll be in months, maybe less than 6 months, maybe a year. The World Bank's going to come in, swanning in, with aid relief packages, because the governments will say they're out of money. So they can't run the magic money tree anymore because they risk inflation. So, but they're not going to be able to just put dollars in the account. They might need to be in another currency. It could be a digital dollar, could be something based on the SDR, special drawing rights, something like this. So the economic crisis, the collapse is being created as we speak. As we speak. Imagine that globally, the cost of lockdowns because of this supposed pandemic it's going to end up being 81 trillion or something crazy like this. 81 trillion for what? For what? 9 months? 9 months of lockdown, 9 months of having to subsidize everything, having to PPP everything, having to Zoom everything. It's costing 80 something. It'll end up being like 80 trillion. Who knows what it'll be by the end of it? It's enough to buy the world twice over. And so that's what happens. It's ridiculous. It never needed to happen. And people say, yes, it did, and people were dying. I'm going to say, no, it didn't. No, it didn't, because not every country did it. Not every country took the bait, was naive and stupid or under orders. Not every country did it. And so some countries didn't, and are absolutely fine. They're absolutely fine. They skipped it. They sat it out. They just sat it out. They sat it out and let it pass by. Let the madness pass by. And those countries are being attacked. Sweden, Belarus, as an example, being absolutely attacked. Nobody wants to talk about Taiwan. They're saying, oh, Taiwan escaped the virus because they had great contact tracing. You got to be kidding me. I think it's more like Taiwan realized that we could either play the game on this and go bankrupt, or let's actually call the deaths on the death certificates for what they actually are. So there's a working theory for you for some of these countries like Japan and Taiwan. Maybe they're a little bit wise to the game, and China. In some ways, China probably is as well, although China has used this crisis to basically fast-track some of its incredible surveillance technologies. But China is a whole social engineering economy within itself. So obviously, over 1 billion people. So they have a lot of people to manage, and they have a certain way they like to do that. It's a single-party state, and they will do that. So that's where we're at with that particular scenario. Gosh, what's going to happen to Australia? I don't know. They can probably carry on and do this for a little while, but it is summer, so I don't know how long they can keep people cooped up and socially distanced during the heat of summer, which is coming in the southern hemisphere. Australian summer will peak around Christmas time, and we'll see how Chairman Dan's doing then. And there will be possibly a rebellion. There'll be a rebellion. So we shall see. We shall see how it goes. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to connect our roving correspondent for culture and sport, Basil Valentine, on the other side for a little Sunday sermon. And also, we'll be talking about the U.S. elections. Going to check the odds checker and see what's happening between Joe and Trump, see if the dial's moving at all with our roving correspondent for culture and sport. We'll be right back. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. This is the Sunday Wire on ACR. Stick around.
Let's talk about the real world for a moment, shall we? Where you're not some wonderful lone wolf hero, but you're part of a team, and you play your position, because that's what America is, Mr. Jeffries. It's one big team. Now, this might be difficult for you to grasp, but I am a patriot. And a patriot is one who makes the right moral choice. Sometimes it takes a strong man to make that choice.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the final segment of Overdrive for the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. And before we talk with our roving correspondent for culture and sport. We'd like to share with you the sermon this week, the Sunday sermon. Welcome to the new church of the new normal and the sacred tabernacle of the Holy Virus. And we're going to be reading today from the branch Covidian gospel. This is the second letter of Bill to the plebeians. And this is what this gospel has to say. O ye of little faith, must you question such bountiful gifts from Most High Glaxo? Is it not a fool's errand to look thy gift horse in the mouth when the great prophylaxis draws nearer still? I ask thy brother, does salvation not cometh to any man, woman, or child who prostrates at the altar of who, which knows best? We shall know them by their mask. Compliance is virtuous, for who is merciful? The guardian of the divine and holy governance. The science saith, render unto Fauci what is Fauci's, and he will repay the good plebeians manyfold in shares. For only gifts from Glaxo can deliver our branch from the pestilence. For we are all servants of the foundation and stewards of the science mysteries. Fauci says, to good plebeians, must you quarrel with thy government over the distribution of the sacred spiritual gifts, when our vaccines are so plentiful? Be not jealous of the immune, for they are free spirits, lifted by the wind of thy holy app. Who among us denies such goodness? For the science will test us many times each day, that we may safely work, eat, and play. Know that discontent among the plebeians, working in the spirit of the science, is like jealousy between the eye and the ear. For the essential and non-essential need not quarrel when normality is near. I say to thee, good plebeians, no gift from the foundation, be it the gift of media tongues, sacrificial lockdowns, self-isolation, or knowledge of the mysteries of the science, has any meaning if thou won't embrace virtuous compliance. Embrace the new normal and bask in these gifts. To the good plebeians of Albion, I saith unto thee, render unto the rebel king of the north his just remuneration, for he will repay King Alexander with servitude to the foundation. Is not the highest tier of all virtuous compliance? Blessed are the people who trust the science. And we'd like to now hand it over to Brother Richard and the choir to sing that great Covidian spiritual, We Will See. Brother Richard, take it away.
Let us offer, as the choir sing, I will see, or we will see. Whichever the case may be, if you're singing alone, it's I will see. If you sing with peoples, it's we will see. See, this shit work out right. They've been rehearsing. Go ahead. We will see. We will see. We will sing. 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 We will see. We will sing. We will sing. We will see. We will see. We will see. We will sing. That was lovely. That was lovely. Yeah, before I spend some more money on rehearsal, we will see. Bring me some shit
All
like
right,
that.
that's brother. Thank you, brother Rich. That's Richard Pryor, actually. As Basil, that's a classic clip from the great comedian Richard Pryor there. So what do you think about all this? Are you on board with the branch Covidian gospel dogma, Brother Basil?
No, not at all.
Tell us why not.
No, but it does seem that, this deference, servility, and obedience is sort of gaining increasingly cult-like status. As this pandemic now, threatens to last, or the crisis that's followed any pandemic threatens to last a year, 18 months. There's no end in sight, is there?
What did you think about the gospel, though? Was it enlightening?
No. It's quite funny, but that's it,
You didn't like it?
No.
But it's true. I mean, it's frightening that you can spin it this way and it absolutely fits. It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
So I think we're getting into very, very strange territories right now.
We have been for some time,
Yeah. What is this? I mean, how does this work on a, esoteric level?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is that in terms of the sort of collective consciousness, that would appear to have been permanently or at least semi-permanently damaged. It's as if somebody has somebody has poured a great big bucket of marked fear, a poisonous substance really, into the waters of our collective consciousness. And it'll take a long time for that to dissipate. Think of an oil spill around some tropical islands. And they try and break it up with detergent. It's never quite the same. Ecosystems are damaged. And the ecosystems of society and of our cultural and collective life have been damaged.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who will want to remain 6 feet apart from others and will wear a mask in public probably for the rest of their lives, just in case.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of damage has been done. And we have to ask ourselves, well, is there, are we now seeing the implementation of a pre-organized agenda? And the pandemic being used as an excuse to implement that agenda. I mean, it's a very good piece by Paul Kudinek, issued this week, which is talking about how the World Economic Forum, in conjunction with the United Nations, the World Wildlife Fund, Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, is talking about how ecosystem services will be bought and sold and traded on Wall Street, with gross domestic product being replaced by natural capital accounting. The idea being that those who have destroyed the planet's biodiversity will now own what remains, including the oceans. Common land, what remains of it, will be further enclosed and privatized. If anything, we'll see an ongoing ecological genocide, increased in pace alongside the full commodification of nature. Commodification is something that we've talked about in the past. It's basically putting a price on everything. Prices on, of course, we have a price on the coffee or the sugar you buy at the supermarket, but now we're talking about putting a price on clean water, on land, on natural resources, on absolutely everything. And this is all part of the new incoming global governance infrastructure underpinning the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, all part of the Great Reset. Now, one of the most interesting things about this is that it's packaged in holistic language with key buzzwords used like thrive, imagine, imagination, reimagine, build back better, sustainability, of course, all the Agenda 2030, New Deals, Green New Deals, which appear to be, all very positive, and you'll find neoliberal politicians like Starmer and the newly re-elected Jacinda Ardern queuing up to vouch for these visions. No doubt Biden and Harris, if they win, will be right in the vanguard. But in fact, it's what they seek to usher in is a societal upheaval that will last for years, if not generations. And the short answer to those of us wondering when things will return to normal, i.e. pre-March 2020, the answer may be never. So in one form or another, the social and physical distancing measures will remain, which further feeds into increased automation, because of course the fewer people in a place of work, the greater the easier it is for them to stay 6 feet apart or whatever. Human contact is therefore minimized, and that's something that we've all noticed over the months of the pandemic. It's very much say the minimum, do the minimum, don't have any physical contact unless you're already married or something. Those dreadful sort of elbow bumps that people have got into doing. And this sort of, whether it's the sort of current strain of COVID-19 or something that follows on behind, this fear of being infected will, it's going to sort of continue as a thread in society for a very long time to come.
Have you noticed the word resilience in any of that language as well?
Yes, that's definitely in there.
Yeah, the smart cities, resilient villages. This is also some of this language that's been couched in this agenda. And it's funny that this week the Greta Thunberg documentary is on world release. So nobody's been making any films for the last 8 months, but apparently Greta has been making a film. It's called I Am Greta, and it's a great critical acclaim, and everybody's just gushing over it, saying what a fantastic, oh my gosh, it's just wonderful. So, I mean, I saw the trailer clip of it. It's just so, it's such a production, basically. And so they're trying to elevate her, and they're in a rush to get this out because she turns 18 on January, second week of January, first week of January. So she'll no longer have the protective cloak, because anybody that's been criticizing Greta up until now is saying, why are you, picking on this teenager? Don't you have anything better to do than to pick on a teenager? Even though it's not her that you're really picking on. It's the multi-million-dollar PR machine that's backing her and scripting her every move, and the multi-billion-dollar interest that you just talked about, which is the financialization of nature. Every blade of grass commodified, every square, liter of ocean commodified, right?
Yeah, it'll be done in the name of conservation, of course. I think people like dear old David Attenborough being co-opted into this agenda. He's been in the press this week saying we have 10 years to prevent mass extinctions and a sort of, permanent ecosystem collapse. It's true that ecosystems are collapsing in different parts of the world. We're losing species, much quicker than we should. Personally, I think it's obviously got more to do with things like loss of habitat than anything else. And of course, let's not forget the massive increase in electromagnetic radiation. Every time radio waves or electromagnetic radiation have been turned up, or a new system has been brought in, so we've had a corresponding loss of biomass. And now we're set for 5G, of course, because this whole reset is running through your mobile phone and the 5G networks. It's absolutely central to it. And of course, nothing is more harmful than massively increased electromagnetic radiation to a level which we've never seen or experienced before.
Right. So yeah. Once again, the world is a giant test tube, isn't it? And we're all kind of guinea pigs in this new experiment, as is the natural world, all the animals and people you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is well, of course, is that although posing, with words like communitarian and sustainable, all the rest of it, posing as, helpful, it's actually a top-down directive. It's not organic, grassroots-led community organizing. It is, for want of a better expression, the forces of domination and control who want to micromanage every aspect of life on Earth, basically.
And
to ask ourselves where this agenda of domination and control is coming from. If you look back through human history, the freedom of the human spirit through art, creativity, our connection with nature has often been at odds with religion and dogmas and other belief systems, etc., that have sought to, belief systems as well as governments, of course, who want to control and direct humanity. And the direction that they seem to want to take us is one away from creativity and away from nature. Those are the two things, really, whereby you can't get away from 5G anywhere. You can't even go and sit in a forest and spend a few hours, just being with the natural world. Instead, we're sort of hived, atomized in boxes and bombarded with endless information, as well as radio waves. I'm not one to talk really because I soak up, I think you do too, Patrick, huge amounts of information every day from our smartphones and computers, and it has become a kind of drug. I mean, people called it face crack in the early day. I remember them saying that, because people, particularly social animals like myself, gregarious people, deprived of human contact, the only way you've got to communicate with people is through the smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
So, this endless sort of nudging, poking, prompting people in particular directions in society away from human contact, to be fearful of each other, wearing masks, and away from nature, so that we become rather sort of artificial beings with our thoughts and energies very much directed by whatever's coming through the 5G network.
So you talked about the Great Reset, and this being it's going to have ramifications, implications for going forward in perpetuity, and we talked about in the past previous shows, obviously we pastiche the new church of the new normal, the COVID as a religion, but very much tied to this is the green religion, is the religion of climate change. And so if you think about, the procession of major religions and civilization over time, what they're attempting here is a global leap forward, basically. I think of it like kind of like a Maoist revolution, but on a global scale, globalized. And it's very much based on paganism in terms of Gaia theory. This is all baked into the Marie Strong and Earth Summit and all of the kind of the climate agenda has got, this kind of Gaia theory that's based on this, and you have Pachamama, Mother Earth religions, and all of these sort of things. This is all very much central. So this is the kind of foundation that they're grafting on top of. But isn't it interesting, just quickly, isn't it interesting that Christianity was also grafted on top of paganism as well? And this is one of the reasons why it really took off when Christianity was, quote, modernized. The move from to the Byzantine period. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, all of us want to live in a healthy environment with thriving plant and animal kingdoms, flourishing biodiversity and areas of wilderness protected by law and all that, all these, everybody wants that. Any right-minded person would want that, But grafted onto the side of that, you've got the whole sort of Green New Deal agenda, which is, as we said, about the commodification of nature, about moving people off the countryside into cities. It incorporates things like, genetically modified plants and organisms because they are, in inverted commas, a more efficient way of using nature. It's a modified nature. And of course, the whole smart city thing is being presented as somehow a energy saving and therefore green agenda. So what I'm saying basically is that there are very genuine elements of a ecologically orientated, I wouldn't call it a religion, but being committed to it. And then there are other aspects which are being grafted on, and the fellow travelers can't always see the difference between the two. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So they manage to co-opt people into what is, in fact, a globalist agenda of domination and control by, making it appear all sort of green and fluffy. You can't be against this. Look, David Attenborough, he's in favour. We all know he's the world's greatest naturalist. Do you know what I mean? How can you oppose something that he endorses? Well, actually, you always need for the promotion of these agendas, what they've always needed is, very sort of acceptable public faces who are, for want of a better expression, useful idiots, who are not aware of the agenda that they're being used to promote. It's as simple as that,
So
for a lot of people, Greta the same,
Yeah. So I've noticed something in the recent years where, and I think this has to do with the kind of the hyper velocity of social media and just digital media in general, mainstream media coming through social platforms, and basically things are becoming globalized in terms of information, and also what trends is global as well. So it's kind of ubiquitous. The deification, or the kind of fast track to sainthood, I'll call it, when John McCain died. So because he had a fight with Trump on a couple of issues, the left and the media just deified John McCain, and part of that was because he was against Trump. And so you had the canonization of McCain. Then you had Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, I've never seen a festival like this. She's lying in state for 4 days or something like that in Washington. I mean, it's like, the Queen, basically, the Queen Mother. And so when David Attenborough dies, he will be canonized by the Green Movement, and he'll become a saint. He'll rest in that position in perpetuity, as will Greta. She's kind of a living saint. A Joan of Arc type character. And Prince Charles might end up in there as well, because he's kind of very much, he's right in there, isn't he, with the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, Prince Charles is right, and Prince William and his son.
And Prince Philip had kind of another twist on this. Obviously, he sees the human race as a virus. And he's quoted as saying, if I get reincarnated, I would love to be or a virus that came back to kill the human race. That's Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, overpopulation is something that's reading between the lines that appears to have been something bothering the elite for many decades. Population reduction agendas have been on the cards for some time now. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, Patrick, but some people say that AIDS was conceived as a population reduction disease and wasn't as successful as they'd hoped it would be, believe it or not.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. I think the thing that does the most damage, let's say, in terms of killing people, will be policies generally. If you look at throughout history, not viruses, be they man-made or be they natural. It's policies. It's actual moves made by state, made by government, made by international organizations that end up being horrific in terms of loss of life. And aren't we seeing that now with lockdown policies globally? I mean, it's lockdown deaths are what's driving excess mortality, not coronavirus in that case, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems almost as if there's an agenda to break the human spirit and make life not worth living. I mean, I know so many people. I mean, everybody's been talking about let's level up here. It's hard to find anybody who isn't, if not sort of clinically depressed, then certainly finding life difficult. Put it that way. Humanity is being tested on so many different levels. And it's going to be, we've got to try and organize and come out the other side, with our heads held high, at the risk of now becoming too esoteric. Of course, some people do believe that this is now the end times that we're living, if you choose to believe the sort of Judeo-Christian historical narrative running through to Revelation,
Yeah.
But if you do, if you buy into that, then this is it, And where we end up at the end of this is very much a matter for each of us individually. There's some people say that there's a battle going on for each of our souls at the moment,
Yeah, I think the green, let's just call it the green religion or the climate-based kind of, it's COVID kind of goes in the same category anyway. But so I think it's absolutely clear that if you look at the conviction, you look at the passion, you look at it has all the different elements of organized religion, has an end times eschatological narrative of, we're all going to die and it's our fault. And so it's kind of our original sin and we must atone and et cetera. This is a type of a religion, but it's more than a religion. It doesn't have very deep roots, in terms of traditionalism, in terms of ethics and morals. It has a veneer of ethics and a veneer of it's the right thing to do, but it's quite shallow. It's 1,000 miles wide and about an inch deep, if you compare it to Christianity or Islam, for instance, or Buddhism.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's tapping into sort of innate submissiveness and even masochism in a lot of people, which manifests in enjoying being told what to do, enjoying the lockdowns and restrictions on liberty, on being forced to wear a mask and all the rest of it. And believe it or not, some people actually want more. You could call them tyrannophiles,
Well, enjoying enforcing the rules or regulations on others. I do see that. Are you seeing this?
Enforced on yourself without a shadow. Oh, definitely. Yeah. A lot of people love being told what to do, and the harder the discipline, in a way, the happier they are. Not just because they feel they're pleasing their masters or something, but just because of distortions in our templates.
Let me run this theory by you. And I was looking at the famines of the Soviet Union under Stalin. How did that happen? Well, it's interesting. It happened because Stalin had some science advisors that rose to the top of the party's science cadre, and they were advising him on agricultural practices. And it's interesting, they rejected Western evolution and genetics science, which was coming up, in the 1920s, early 20th century. They saw that, they rejected that as a kind of a Western kind of, capitalist type, Darwinism, the things that we're predetermined by our genes in any way was kind of an anathema to communist ideology. So the scientists who adopted this ideological position, they looked at science through the same lens. So they didn't believe in genetics, and that extended to biological science. So they were like, you create the perfect environment, and whatever will germinate and grow and become strong in the perfect environment. So this is kind of communism politically. You create the perfect society, you put the man in there, and he'll become the ultimate citizen, loyal to the party, loyal to the state, as a good little worker bee, okay? They extended that to agriculture in terms of how they planted seeds, and they had the most cockamamie ideas. And it was backed by the party, backed by the government, and any scientists that were basically saying this isn't a good idea, they ended up in a Siberian work camp. And guess what happened? It ended up 4 million people died of famine in the Ukraine. And they kept going with it. They didn't stop and say, oh shit, we got this wrong. Pardon my French. They doubled down, and they attacked any dissenters. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. They can't stop now with this. It's not gone too far for people to say, oh, hold on a minute. This has all been a terrible mistake.
So is this a Soviet mindset that's kind of crept in at government level, globally? I mean, are we in a kind of a global Soviet somehow that we've slid into with a lot of people not realizing it? Is that a possibility?
Well, absolutely. It's a totalitarian mindset, hence the demonization of anybody who dares to question the official narrative. They have to be discredited either on a personal or professional level. We're paying the price, you see, for not exposing, or rather, for living in a society where the exposition of the lies of 9/11 are allowed to stand.
Right.
4 aircraft mysteriously disappeared, and 3 New York skyscrapers were turned to dust in midair. And yet, if you believe in the laws of physics, you're a conspiracy theorist. So what they've been attempting to do is, and they're doubling down on it, is create a sharp dividing line between acceptable opinion, which is following your Soviet authoritarian model. You're allowed to say this, think this, do that. And then this, as we said last week, these heretical opinions, which, irrespective of science issues, the issues are never discussed. When the mainstream attack the heretics, it's always on an ad hominem basis. Just, you stand alongside people with unacceptable opinions, therefore we're not going to listen to anything you have to say,
Yes. So you politically effectively like a political labeling, right?
Absolutely.
And so you can,
the hallmark of authoritarian regimes. That was the case certainly under Stalin, that if you weren't loyal to the party, you were denounced, at those big congresses, the purges. Back in the 1950s, people sat there on the platform. They thought they were all cozy and safe, and then somebody gets up, Stalin gets up and denounces them from the platform, and the next thing they know, they've been strong-armed out of the room and packed off on a train to Siberia, never to be seen again, And it's the same thing. It's this, the lack, what we're in danger of losing is proper, grown-up discussion and the free flow of debate and ideas.
Yeah,
which seems
because
to be taboo. We've talked about it before. We're increasingly living in a very narrow opinion corridor. Look at Keir Starmer, elected leader of the Labour Party, hardly dares to disagree with Boris over anything at all. 32 Labour MPs were written to very sharply by the chief whip because they dared to oppose torture just last week, you know.
really,
Yeah. And this whole, giving the security services basically the James Bond license to kill. Did you see that?
yeah, absolutely.
It's all been smuggled through very quietly, you know. For all I know, someone could turn up at my door or your door, Patrick, tonight or in the morning and, just put a bullet in your head and say, we're MI6, we're allowed to do it. Bad luck. So he was a terrorist, that's it, finish. He was a COVID denier and therefore a danger to the rest of society. I mean, already that phrase is being trotted out, COVID denier, you know.
Yeah. So you're talking about the new crime bill that allows any government agent to commit any crime and has immunity from prosecution, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think a front bencher resigned over this, I believe, as well.
That's right.
Yeah, and it doesn't extend. It's not just the security service. It's Customs and Excise, Competitions and Authority Agency.
Just off for any reason.
Yeah, it's called the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill, with criminal conduct in parentheses, and it's pretty frightening. So basically, no limits to the crimes that agents of the state can commit. So this is unprecedented. This is a major step forward in terms of fascism, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, this is real.
See, and the masochists say, "Oh no, this is good. We want this." Do you know what I mean? Make it harder.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah. So there's a few conscientious Labor MPs that resigned from the front bench or who voted against it, but most of them sat out and did what they did for the coronavirus bill. So Keir Starmer, the Labor leader, the Blairite, is basically the chief whip of Boris Johnson on the other side, isn't he? Yeah. It's a pretty crazy state of affairs, I'll tell you. So C.J. Hopkins published a fantastic piece. He's from the Consent Factory. He's a great author and playwright, of course. And he republished it with 21st Century Wire, revealed the Covidian cult. I'm just going to read you a couple of paragraphs from this piece because it absolutely dovetails with what we're talking about now. C.J. Hopkins writes, "One of the hallmarks of totalitarianism is mass conformity to a psychotic official narrative. Not a regular official narrative like the Cold War, quote unquote, or the War on Terror, quote, narratives. No, a totally delusional official narrative that has little or no connection to reality and that is contradicted by a preponderance of facts. Nazism and Stalinism are classic examples of this, but the phenomenon is better observed in cults and other subcults and societal groups. Numerous examples will spring to mind: the Manson family, Jim Jones' People's Temple, the Church of Scientology, Heaven's Gate, etc. Each with its own psychotic official narrative: Helter Skelter, Christian Communism, Xenu, and the Galactic Confederacy, and so on. Looking in from the dominant culture, or back through time in the case of the Nazis, the delusional nature of these official narratives is glaringly obvious to most rational people. What many people fail to understand is that those who fall prey to them, whether individual cult members or entire totalitarian societies, such narratives do not register as psychotic. On the contrary, they feel entirely normal. Everything in their social, quote, reality reifies and reaffirms the narrative, and anything that challenges or contradicts it is perceived as an existential threat. That's just the beginning. It's just such a fantastic piece. But, you read this, I take it, Basil. What did you think?
Yeah, he's hit the nail full square on the head. It's this, criminalization of dissent. I mean, as he says, further than criminalization, it's regarding opposite opinions as fundamentally dangerous to the status quo, and those that espouse them, therefore, as a major threat.
So what you're saying is that the power structure or the authority, the government or whatever, has developed a hard shell of power, and then but there's a terror or a fear from inside there that anything that challenges central party is potentially dangerous, and must be dealt with. Is that how it looks to you?
We can no longer agree to disagree.
Yeah,
this is the problem.
Yeah, that's a big step away from
the complete opposite of sort of parliamentary democracy and the so-called liberal society that we all grew up in. Where, as Voltaire said, I may disagree with you. To paraphrase him, I may disagree with you fundamentally, but I will defend your right to say what you have to say.
I'm a big believer in that.
You no longer have the right to say what you want to say because of the introduction of things like terms like fake news, a conspiracy theory, which sort of, again, without discussing the issues, can be used to rubbish dissenting opinions.
Yeah, the term disinformation, that's being heavily used now. That got trotted out with Russian disinformation in the 2016 election, fake news. That term was invented by guess who?
But you tell me, Patrick.
Uncle Joe, Stalin.
Oh, right. I think you say Uncle Joe Biden.
No, that's another Uncle Joe. We'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah, to go back to the religious things, people have lost their love of the truth. This is sort of at the root of the problem. People are no longer in love with the truth. They don't care. Oh, the truth about 9/11 is, oh God, I haven't got time for that. Let's get on with our lives. It's all too complicated and too challenging to think differently, to be concerned intimately with the truth. Oh, who knows anyway? You're saying that, somebody else saying something else, Who knows? I haven't got time. The truth, like we go back to the X-Files, the truth is out there. That was a very clever way of saying, forget about the truth. Don't bother looking for it.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah, or it's out there and you might never find it, so you might as well not bother, right?
Don't bother looking. You know what I mean? Yeah. So as a result, we've seen academia, society downgraded. Others have talked about the total failure of academia to question 9/11, with the exception of retired academics like Peter Dale Scott and David Ray Griffin.
Yeah.
The universities used to be hotbeds of analysis. Now, at the University of Minnesota, you can go on a course to overcome your whiteness. That's apparently the biggest problem.
Yes. Oh, did you hear the latest about COVID? Toxic masculinity is what's driving men to not wear masks. So because of if men who don't wear masks exhibit traits of toxic masculinity, says Olivia Petter from the Independent in the UK, Independent newspaper. She's just published this article in the Independent, basically saying it's down to toxic masculinity. So this is a gender issue. This desire to not wear masks and not conform, and this should be, beaten down as much as possible. Well, imagine that.
What more needs to be said, Patrick?
So, I knew there was some toxic masculinity lurking under the surface there. I just knew it. I couldn't put my finger on it. I knew that would just explain everything.
Actually, what we're seeing, and it's happening more and more really, is the gradual inversion of society, where ignorance is exalted and the most dreadful sort of poisonous music is celebrated and promoted.
Mm-hmm. Disgusting art.
Anti-human, exactly. Anti-human ways of behaving are considered normal.
I mean, Damien Hirst, the most celebrated British artist, if you want to call him that, of the last 50 years or whatever, would like hang a dead horse from the ceiling of the Tate Gallery, and flies would be flying around it, and they'd say, "Oh, how wonderful that is," or some dung under a glass cover or in a glass box, like basically, and that's like being sold for 50, 100, 200, $500,000, I don't know what, but just it is kind of a signal, really, that there's kind of the degradation, and most people looked at it and thought, oh, that's just a little bit of a dalliance and whatnot, but actually there's quite deep symbolism with that in terms of culture. And you talked about music and how the worst types of music are being elevated and celebrated, and anything that's beautiful or melodic or beautifully composed is just completely marginalized.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a bit like a cult. It's gone global. It's kind of a global cult.
Yeah, and an atmosphere of a sort of rolling crisis has been engendered, and these dystopian cultural artifacts, such as they are, sort of fit with this rolling crisis new society. Do you see what I mean?
They do go together, don't they?
Yeah.
Spirit cooking and
beauty have been destroyed, and instead we have this inverted society, where nature, honesty, truth, as you say, melody, harmony are all cast aside in favor of this very sort of jarring, false, painful.
Well, you see it in the art, in the music, where romance and courtship is being replaced with sexual deviance and hooking up, and it's expressed right through the arts and through music and everything. And
yes,
what's interesting? You look at Jonestown. Are you familiar with that story?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's very interesting if you think about it. Like let's call it like it's the Diamond Princess of cults. Basically, you could really kind of analyze what was going on there. It seemed to me from stuff I've read and people that have written about this and published books and so forth, that it looked like it was kind of a CIA front operation down in South America. But the four principles were behavioral control, control of information, thought control, and emotion. And the most important part is emotional control. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. We've got a documentary up on Sunday Wire right now, or 21st Century Wire. Sunday screening is the Mennonites and the Mennonite community down in Belize in Central America. Not a very big country, 400,000 people. I don't think there's one case of COVID, by the way, in the Mennonite community, and they're totally off grid. They're totally off grid. They're off grid culturally. They're off grid with no electronics, no TV, nothing. Politically, they're off grid. They're completely, in all senses of the word, off grid. And so Jonestown was off grid. So I'm not saying Mennonite. I'm not saying they're a cult, but yeah, they've got a lot of aspects of a cult in terms of the insular nature of it. But those principles of Jonestown, behavioral control, emotional control, control of information, control of thoughts, we are seeing some of these aspects kind of they're being enforced in a way through the current digital culture, the kind of digital monolithic monopolistic culture that we're seeing now, the globalization of digital culture and politics, and we are seeing, so Jonestown's kind of going global. Aspects of the cults are mainstreamed, is what I'm saying. What do you think?
Well, let's hope it all doesn't end in mass suicide, but obviously suicides are up, during this crisis. And,
I think they spiked the Kool-Aid, actually.
Yeah.
I think they spiked it.
And people are increasingly desperate for sort of messianic figures, for want of a better expression.
Yes.
In the leadership vacuum that we have. Speaking of which, we said we would get on to the American election, now only a couple of weeks away.
What are the bookies saying?
Well, it's Biden all the way. I mean, in fact, Biden represents theoretically some value at 2-1 on. The pollsters say that he has an 85% chance of winning.
Right.
And at the moment, he is 2-1 on. So have your $20 on to win another 10.
Okay.
But of course, Hillary was 4 or 5-1 on last year.
In 2016, yeah.
Yeah, she was 5-1 on. You had to have $50 on to win 10 4 years ago. In fact, I heard of somebody who had £600,000 on a Hillary win. Obviously lost. He thought he was going to buy some money,
I know some people that won big on Trump. They won big.
You said in the week we were chatting that you thought Trump was going to pull it off again.
Yeah.
I think that they've had enough of him, and the next stage of the agenda requires a Biden-Harris presidency.
Interesting.
I mean, if for no other reason than to maintain the illusion of democracy,
So you're taking an overarching kind of conspiracy approach to the selection, let's call it, of the U.S. presidential administration, right?
Yes. I mean, it all depends, as I say, on what is the next phase of the agenda, because a Trump win will mean, I'm afraid, anything from 10 to 100 American cities in flames in the days and weeks after his election.
Well, at least 5 or 6 I can name.
Right. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I think it may be more. We've Antifa, Black Lives Matter. Things have been a bit quieter over the last few weeks. I think that's partly in anticipation of the election. But if Trump wins, I think things might erupt.
I think, we've said so in the past. I mean, I tend to agree with you in that the establishment definitely, of course, seems to be backing the Biden-Harris ticket. The media, the mainstream media on the whole, seems to be backing them. The deep state, the civil service, all that seems to be backing them. The green mafia as well.
Yep.
But let's look at the polling. This time last year, this time in 2016, Hillary Clinton, Princeton Election Consortium had her at 99% probability, Huffington Post 98%, Daily Kos 92%, CNN 91%, PredictWise 89%, New York Times 85%, and 538. That's a good polling political source, 72%. So overwhelmingly this time, very similar patterns we're seeing from 2016 with Hillary Clinton and how Biden's looking in the national polling. What I'm saying, Basil, is that I think it's possible that the delusional nature of the institutional delusional nature of the Democratic establishment and the mainstream media, that they are capable of making the exact same mistake twice. That's my position on this.
Yes.
So I look at Russiagate, and it just reaffirms that belief that a lot of these people, they're not acting. They really have lost the plot. I mean, it's not just that they're cynically acting for Machiavellian political reasons, but a lot of them they really believe that Russia, that Putin put Trump in the White House. They really believe it.
I know.
So, and these people are in media. They're high up in the Biden campaign. They're in positions of, quite influential positions that they themselves have lost touch with reality. So I think that I'm looking at state by state, Basil, and I'm seeing a very different picture in terms of, so I think it's personally neck and neck. It's right down the middle. It's 50-50 Brexit.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, you can back Trump at 2-1 against.
Okay.
So, have $50 on, win 100 and go home with 150.
Okay.
But, I think he's looking increasingly doomed.
But the odds are tightening, aren't they, a little bit?
There was money for Trump after the Biden, the Hunter Biden business, which Tucker Carlson has been amplifying. But amongst hardcore Democrats, indeed amongst most of those voting for Biden, they don't care. They couldn't care less if Biden used his influence as vice president to make money for his son and, influence Ukrainian policy and all that. People couldn't care. They don't care.
Yeah.
The dislike of Trump is so intense.
Yes.
Much more intense than for any politician I can remember, with the possible exception of Jeremy Corbyn, Populism must die. Nationalism and populism must be expunged. And, part of this whole great reset that we've been talking about is, the move towards global government. We need a world government because, to deal with things like coronavirus. Was it the Pope the other day calling for world government? Actually, quite actively. So nationalists like Trump, forget it. He's got to go.
I wouldn't be surprised if this Pope calls for the end of the Catholic Church by the time he's done. I mean, he's going to call for Gaiaism to replace. I mean, they might do. They might make the move. Might make the slime move sideways. What do you think? The Vatican? Are they green underneath?
Yeah, I mean, the agenda that people say is on the cards is the sort of confluence, the merging of all world religions into a single faith.
Yes, I've seen. Yeah, that's UN Sustainable Agenda 21, 2030. That's in the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interfaith.
Yeah. One final story before we go, on a slightly more humorous note. The UK could face a shortage of sports shoes, track pants, and stretchy leggings, as retailers and suppliers are struggling to keep up with the pandemic-related surge in demand, because, of course, everybody's working from home.
Right.
Therefore, wearing more casual, comfy things. And the sort of smart, casual look that people wear to work, or for the suit, that's on the way out, and everybody's just slobbing around in track pants.
So there's been a run on pajamas and plushy slippers.
That's right.
What about furries?
Well, I got some very comfy furry slippers myself this week, Patrick, but that's a bit warm.
I hope they're the right color.
They're blue. That's so good. There we go. Britain, meanwhile, sort of lurches from lockdown to semi-lockdown and back again. Already most of 2021 looks cancelled, doesn't it?
Yep. Just back to the U.S. We just got a couple minutes left. And did you see the Joe Biden had a rally where everyone was sat with a white circle around their chair? They're all spaced out about 10 feet each. And it was the spookiest looking thing I've ever seen. So there was only about like 10 people in the room. And then he was at a pulpit speaking. We got a picture of it up at 21st Century Wire. And then Trump had a rally. Biden's was indoors. And Trump had a rally in outside an air hangar in, I think it was Florida. And there must have been about 50,000 people. So I'm just looking at the excitement level, the enthusiasm gap here. Do you think do they have a serious problem that they're just keeping a lid on, or what's going on with this?
Yeah, I know what you mean. There are different types of campaign. Certainly, if we were to go back to 2012, when Obama beat Mitt Romney, there was much more enthusiasm behind the Obama campaign. He was the one packing out the big rallies, and it was, quite obvious that he was going to win. And it can be, but it can be misleading, the sort of enthusiasm factor, because, I don't know that the type of campaign Biden and Harris are running is all that much geared towards, people turning up in person. Obviously, the Biden supporters are tend to be much more sort of COVID true believers than Trump supporters, who are generally, of course, much more skeptical about Covidianity. So it might be slightly misleading, but I'm not,
But what excites the base? On the Democratic side, I'm looking for something. What gets them excited? It can't be Biden, right? And it really can't be Kamala Harris. The only thing that gets them excited on the left is the hate for Trump. Like, that will motivate them. Like COVID, yeah, they're on board with Covidianity and lockdowns and loving the pandemic, but that's not going to. It's not exciting the base. It's just kind of a status quo thing. Whereas on the Republican side, Amy Coney Barrett's nomination, it totally excited the right-wing conservative wing of the party. That's moving voters. Lifting lockdowns, that's really motivating people in states like Florida, Michigan, Ohio, for instance. And so the BLM racism issue isn't necessarily going to move any extra voters on the Democratic side. It doesn't seem to be exciting the base at the moment, the racism issue. Whereas on the right, the law and order issue, which stems from the BLM riots earlier in the year, that's moving the base. That's people are registering on the GOP side from the data I'm seeing because of that issue. And Trump himself excites the base when he does his whole shtick, at the rallies. His whole kind of, it's like a celebrity roast, his rallies. It's like Don Rickles.
Yeah.
So
it's come down to a few states, as people have been saying. It's going to come down.
Yeah.
Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, the same battlegrounds that have been fought over the last, 4 or 5 elections, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, because it's almost like Biden's invisible in public and his base is invisible, but he's somehow riding high in the polls. And it's just strange. The whole thing's weird.
Plus, you've got in the whole sort of fraudulent factor, particularly with all these mail-in ballots this time round.
Yes, and I think a few courts have intervened and shut it down. I believe they shut it down in Michigan. They said you got to have it in by Election Day. The Democrats wanted it to extend it to the 10th of November, which means you couldn't call the state for over a week. That's just a recipe for rioting chaos, of course. and not accepting the result. So, which we explained to people that was on the cards. That's a real plot. That's absolutely underway. In previous shows, we talked about that. But I think the postal votes are not being turned in the same level that was expected, which means that that if those are new postal votes compared to 2016, that they've really exhausted their blood supply, let's call it like that, exhausted their blood supply with the postal votes early. And we know that the majority of the Republicans are going to be voting on the day. So I've been looking at the results from 2016 very closely because I see it very much in terms of parity with what we're seeing now. But the X factors, like what you said, Basil, this drive by the Democrats to vote by post. But I think it seems like they're falling short on the take up for postal votes in a lot of states. So how much is that going to be in effect? In some states it's not, and it's going to distort the pre-polling in the run up to the election. I think it'll work against the Democrats because more people will stay home thinking the pre-polling looks just so rosy. And it also gives Bernie Sanders supporters who hate Biden, they'll give them an excuse to sit it out because they're looking for an excuse to sit it out. They don't want to hold their nose and pull the lever for Biden, a lot of burners. So the burner factor, that's a bit of dark matter in there. That's worth a couple percentage points in certain states where Bernie had massive contingents. Not all states, but some. I don't know. There's a lot of crazy factors and variables in here. I mean, it's just like the science of U.S. elections. Oh my goodness, it's just amazing.
Well, this is particularly sort of complex this year. Really is.
We're gonna break this down in detail. I've been doing a little bit of work and crunching data, and we've got our own sophisticated algorithms, by the way, that we're using to model some of these scenarios.
Of course, the greatest election fixer of modern times is in the blank, Patrick?
Diebold? I don't know.
Karl Rove.
What's he saying?
He's saying Trump can beat Biden on the issue of who can better restart the economy. And he's citing a Gallup poll that says 56% of Americans say they're better off now than in 2016.
56?
56%.
That's even during COVID.
Well, that's what the Gallup apparently said.
That's a Gallup poll. Holy mackerel. Gallup. That's a mainstream poll. So 56% are saying they're better off than 2016. Wow. The Democrats can't be happy about that polling result.
No. I mean, I don't know whether Rove is working for Trump. If he is, then get your money on Trump because Rove is a master fixer. 2004, and when he managed to swing a close race, Bush actually lost. I hope I'm not slandering him. Well,
No, he did lose. He did lose in 2000.
Mark Crispin Miller actually published an exhaustive tome about how the Republicans stole the 2004 election.
Oh,
and
yes.
I remember watching the coverage that night, and James Zogby, the pollster, was saying, well, it's been very close, but the undecideds, the key voters making up their mind at the last minute, have broken 2-1 in favor of Kerry, in favor of John Kerry.
Mm-hmm.
And, the exit polls were all showing Kerry was going to win the key states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And they went over to the White House where Bush was expected to concede at about 1 a.m., 2 a.m. He was expected to concede. And there was they were all there. Old Poppy Bush was there, Barbara, the whole family. And there was we're not conceding, da-da-da-da-da. And Karl Rove was there. And then I went to bed. I got up a few hours later and, wow, Bush has won,
Ohio was the swindle, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the one. Yeah, I mean, Mark Crispin Miller's book details myriad ways in which it was swindled, apart from anything else, the voting machines. Yeah, but all sorts of other things. You know, lack of voting machines in heavy Democrat areas. Mm-hmm. So, but remember, of course, the Bush clan, cartel, junta, call it what you like, very, very different from Trump. You know, an awful lot of Bush acolytes and neocons are behind Biden.
Yeah. No, Bush totally more in common with Clinton than Trump.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know what Karl Rove's doing over the next couple of weeks.
I don't know. He's probably so we got a minute left. Let me just give you a quick rundown on the battleground states of what we got in terms of our data. So at the moment, we've got Michigan too close to call, dead heat, can't call a favorite. Pennsylvania too close to call, dead heat. Minnesota, we got edge to Trump. Nevada too close to call, dead heat. Wisconsin too close to call, dead heat. Arizona edge to Trump. Virginia edge to Biden. North Carolina edge to Trump. Nebraska edge to Trump. That's a open state with proportional delegate electoral votes. New Mexico edge to Biden. Florida edge to Trump. Iowa edge to Trump. Ohio edge to Trump. North Carolina edge to Trump. Texas blowout for Trump, we predict. So, I mean, that's just a taste of what we're going to unveil this week so far. So if that's the case, he's going to win by a less margin, a smaller margin than he won Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College, but he'll lose the popular vote again by something like 3 million votes nationally. Most of those are going to be from California, by the way.
Right.
So, that whole popular vote talking point, California eats up basically all of that margin. New York and California, there's your 3 million popular votes, basically. So, yeah, which are, solid blue states, blue all the way through, basically. Whereas Texas is a bit of a steak that's cooked medium rare. It's blue on the outside in the cities, but definitely red on the inside. So the Texans like their steak cooked rare. So you could say, use the steak metaphor for all of these states. You can kind of, in terms of the blue and the red split, whereas California is blue all the way through. That's well done. That steak is well done. Oregon, well done. Washington, pretty much well done. Although it's a little bit, medium well, you'd say, in Washington. They've got a good conservative rural corridor there in Western Washington. New York, blue all the way through.
I just voted for a Democratic candidate, Patrick.
Who?
When was the last time Texas voted Democrat?
They've had some, in terms of a national election?
Yeah, in terms of the presidential election.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I couldn't tell you. I'm going to take a wild guess. I don't know, Kennedy or something. I don't know.
Jimmy Carter, 1976.
When?
Jimmy Carter, 1976.
You're serious?
He won 51% in Texas.
Really? So that far back? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, last time Texas voted Democrat.
Okay.
So I put Texas in the Trump column.
Yeah. Nate Silver disagrees. He's got Texas. I mean, he's got everything blue, basically, other than about 5 states. So I don't know. He might have to fall on his sword.
Does our predicting Biden landslide?
Yes, absolutely. Biden landslide. So, I don't think that's going to help Biden, because it's not going to motivate voters for Democrats. It's going to send allow more people to sit it out. Like the burners. There's the burner factor. The burn level. Burn level's part of that dark matter. Polls aren't picking that up. So we'll pick it all up, though. We'll pick it all up. We got a fantastic, and I hope you'll be with us, Basil, for the next few weeks, kind of keeping an eye on some of these trends and changes. It's going to be very interesting. This is a historic election. Like you said, it could chart the course of the U.S. and the world in terms of this Great Reset agenda. So there's more at stake than we thought, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think Biden can win Texas, you can get 5-2 against.
Right.
Put on $20 and win 50.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Biden can win Texas. Florida, the last one I'll look at, very, very close, but Biden is a shade of odds on, like more than a shade. He's 6-4 on, and Trump's 6-5 against. So the bookies have Florida going by.
They do. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm also looking at momentum. Momentum is a big factor for me. So I'm looking at some things that are creating momentum. One of them is the Supreme Court Justice nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. That's momentum for Trump. That's going to motivate the evangelicals, the conservative wing. The other thing is lockdown. Lockdown's now a momentum issue. Florida is feeling good with Ron DeSantis has lifted the lockdown. He says you're not going to have any more lockdowns. And so that's created a kind of a feel-good feeling. So Trump has definitely associated himself with lifting lockdowns, whereas Biden's kind of pro-lockdown. So there's division there. So COVID's on the ballot now in a way that it wasn't before. So it depends how people are emotionally with that issue, right? As to where that could move the momentum, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the sort of stuff we're looking at in terms of, late breaking trends, that are going to push 1 or 2 points. They're all close. All these states are really close, a lot of them. So, 1 or 2 or 3 points difference is going to make the difference for carrying the state. 1 percentage point difference is going to make a difference.
Could come down to a few hundred votes,
Yeah, it's tight.
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Michigan, 0.3, or Wisconsin 0.77, 0.42 or something in Pennsylvania. I mean, it was just minuscule margins that Trump carried those states in 2016. Minuscule. So it is a toss-up across a lot of these battleground states right now. So we're looking at factors that are going to move the dial, basically. So we're looking really close. We got our magnifying glass out. We're reading a lot of stuff, listening to a lot of stuff, and we have pretty good sources on this. So we'll see. I'd put a punt on Trump, though.
You should say that because the money's been for him in the last couple of days. He's shortened up in the last couple of days. Yeah.
Okay, well, we might need your help. Going forward, Basil, to sort of help call this one as it breaks. So, we definitely need your knowledge and your skills on this. It's a bit of a horse race, this one.
Yep, there are only 2 possible winners.
Yep. So that's it. That's it for this week. Thank you very much, Basil Valentine, roving correspondent for Culture and Sport, for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick.
It's a fantastic and enlightening segment, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in for this week. This week, the Sunday Wire will be broadcasting hopefully next week at the same time, the same channel. And also, we want to thank everybody, our supporters, subscribers, and members to 21wired.tv. Thank you so much for your support. You're helping to fund our investigative work, also this show, and our other work that we're publishing at 21st Century Wire, and we'll continue to publish going into this election season and beyond afterwards as well. And also, we'd like you to consider also supporting the Alternate Current Radio Network. This is the network that hosts this show. If you look at the top of our show page, there's a link for Alternate Current Radio that'll take you to their website where you can find options to donate or become a patron to ACR. They need your support. It's a great outlet, independently run, fantastic content in terms of talk, politics, in terms of music, You'll find everything curated incredibly well at ACR. You can catch the archives for this show and other shows on ACR up at Spreaker.com. Just type in Alternate Current Radio at Spreaker.com. Just click on the player on our show page and it should take you directly to that website. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we've got for this week. Thank you again to Basil, and thank you also to our contributors this week at 21st Century Wire. There'll be more coming out tomorrow morning, so stay tuned. It's going to be a wild ride over the next 3 weeks, and we'll be here to bring you coverage here and also at the ukcolumn.org. And we'll see you on Friday with Mike Robinson on the UK Column News. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Take care, everybody. Have a great week, and hang in there. We are seeing daylight on so many different issues, and we just might be able to find daylight through the matrix in the coming weeks and months. We shall see. We'll keep plugging away and keep looking for those cracks, and hopefully we'll get some good results here and there running into the new year. Take care, everybody. All the best.